Hello. Hello, everyone. Today we are talking a bit about GMPs, which stands for Good Manufacturing Processes, and testing products. This is really in response to a question about product testing, but while we're on that subject, I figured I would talk a bit about GMPs. Also, I know I'm looking very Outlander today. It's really cold in the cabin. The cabin is only heated with wood fire and this little heater that you might hear buzzing in the background. So I gotta protect my neck. Okay, so I want to start with GMPs and lead into product testing because everyone has to have good manufacturing processes. Not everybody has to test their products. Is it a good idea to test your products? Yes. When is it a good idea to test your products? Honestly, I think it's more important if it's a new recipe. I think it's more important if you don't know where your ingredients are coming from. For example, if the ingredients in a recipe are not from a local farm that you are very familiar with, their growing processes, their soil, etc. If your herbs are coming from like near a roadside or an urban farm, it's good to test for things like heavy metals and any sort of pollutants that could be getting in contaminating the herbs a bit. We live in a pretty rural area, and our farmers are in rural areas, and therefore, I'm so much less worried about where my ingredients come from. Not to mention, we've tested our products enough times that I know that the ingredients from the farms we work with are. You can also test for potency, which is really nice in the beginning as well. Testing used to be a little more scarce, but ever since CBD took over the world, there's lab testing everywhere. Because you do have to test for CBD because you need to know what the THC content is, what milligram of CBD you've pulled, contaminants, etc. Okay, so what are GMPs, good manufacturing processes? That means that you can prove that your manufacturing process is good, right? A manufacturing process is anytime you are making a product, you are on the manufacturing side. So a retail store, for example, that does not make products, they're just reselling products. They're not, they don't have to have good manufacturing processes because they're not manufacturing. So a good manufacturing process, there seems to be a lot of confusion around this because people seem to think that there's some master guide somewhere, and there's not. I mean, there kind of is in that you can pay for classes with teachers that'll give you one. There's guidelines on the FDA website and on like the Natural Product Association, and all those kinds of things. But your good manufacturing processes have more to do with you, your business. Where are you manufacturing the products? What ingredients are you using, etc. And a teacher, the FDA, they don't know that. Only you know that. So it's important to know that GMPs are made by you. In your first year or two of business, well, I should say when you're making under $20,000 a year and you're really only profiting maybe half of that in your natural products business, it's so much less important. You're learning, you're getting your footing, you're figuring out where you're sourcing from, your recipes, etc. Once you start getting products in more and more hands or grossing higher annual sales, then it's so much more important. And it's just a good thing. Everybody needs to have them. It's not, you shouldn't see it as this big scary, oh no, the government is forcing me to do this. Like every time I post on Instagram about GMPs, I get some messages from people being like, why are you enforcing this crap? And I get where they're coming from. I do think that GMPs are partially the product of the colonization of herbalism. You know, things like, oh, you have to have a license and a degree and you have to prove that you're doing things the right way. But I don't see it that way at all. And y'all know I'm very big on the colonization of herbalism and how fucked up it is, and that we need to totally eradicate that. But I don't think that that's what GMPs are. I think that pre-colonization of herbalism, like let's just say it never was colonized and we were selling herbal products today, I still think that people in a world like this with pollution and environmental factors like this would want businesses to be able to show that they have a good, clean product that's worth investing in. So I don't see GMPs as a bad thing. I see it as a really good thing. Another important time for this to come into factor is with employees, because you all want to be on the same page with your manufacturing process and what that looks like. And, you want to make sure everybody's doing things consistently. So something that I've planned on doing for a while now is publishing a GMP worksheet that we use here at Cedar Hill, just to help people have some sort of starting point of what that really needs to look like. And just to give you an example, when you are going to make a recipe, you pull out all your ingredients, you pull out your utensils that you need to make it. That is the most important part of GMPs, because you need to be able to prove that you're using non-porous materials. Things like wood and certain types of plastic are a little too porous, so if you're using it in one recipe, you might be transferring and contaminating the next time you use it. So they really want to see that you're using stainless steel or silicone, and that goes for everything, your pots, pans, utensils, etc. Anything you can sterilize, you want to be able to sterilize this during the cleaning process to ensure that you're not moving contaminants from one recipe to the next. That's a big one. Another big one is, look at your ingredients that you're using. Where did they come from? What date did you buy them? And these are all things that are really important anyways, right? Because we want to make sure that we're using, sorry, I got cut off from a phone call, but we really want to make sure that we're using the products that we purchase first, right? Like, you want to use your products in order. For anyone who has worked in kitchens, this is just like standard order of operations in a kitchen. You move the ingredients that you purchase first in front of the new ingredients to make sure that you have a rotation and use them in order. That's definitely an important thing for any business, whether you have to prove that you're doing it or not. So having a recipe sheet that is asking you to fill out, what date were the ingredients purchased that you're using? Where did they come from? I'm trying to think of what utensils are you using? When were they sterilized last? What some other factors that you wouldn't think matter that do. What temperature is it in the room, and what is the humidity? So it's super cheap. It's like $5 to buy a temperature and humidity gauge online. And it's actually really helpful because we recently realized that it's too humid on certain days in the office to make the bath fizz. Bath fizz is, a combination of baking soda and citric acid that when ignited by water starts to fizz. So if there's a certain amount of moisture in the air, the bath fizz isn't going to be as vibrant when you use it. And so all these things matter, and how you're able to troubleshoot is, let's say you make a tincture or a tea or something, and then you have it at home and you're using it and you notice something like that is off, like weird. My bath fizz isn't bubbling like usual, or the color in this isn't as vibrant as usual, or whoa, why does this smell different or taste different or whatever. You're able to go back to that recipe and say, oh, you know what? The mountain mint that I'm purchasing from this farm has a much different flavor than the mountain mint that I wild harvest. Or the butterfly pea powder that I purchased from Amazon is not as vibrant as the one that I purchased from this place or what have you. So it might feel really annoying at first to have to like do all of that, but I promise you these logs are there for a reason. It's worth it. So get yourself, I have a filing cabinet, but I definitely started with just a little file book. And I try to put my prep list, my batch numbers, my recipe cards, everything in there. And that is the biggest thing that the FDA wants you to be doing, is logging everything so that if anything goes wrong, you can pinpoint it. That is the moral of GMPs. And I see a lot of, not a lot actually, there's only like 2 people that I see doing this, but there's a couple really big herbalists that are making GMPs this big, scary, fearful thing. And I think that they're doing that for 2 reasons. One, because I think that they don't want anyone to question them because they're very large scale, and I totally understand that. But 2, I think that they are selling GMP information, and they're wanting people to be terrified and therefore buy their course to learn more, right? And I don't know what their motives are, but it's really not a huge deal. And it's also the important thing, like I get questions all the time, like, can you tell me exactly what the GMPs and state regulations are? No, I can't. Because not only does it depend on your state, they're not all the same, but it also depends on your county. For example, Davidson County, Nashville, has a lot more regulations than these outskirt counties because there's way more businesses, there's more people to control. And again, I think that's a good thing because when there's like a bazillion businesses, there has to be some order, right? Whereas I'm probably the only natural product business in my town, so it's not like there's a ton of people saturating and possibly corrupting the system out here, so they're a lot less worried about me. They're impressed by the documentation that I have and what I'm able to prove. If your county is uncertain of regulations, they're probably going to tell you to look at the food safety regulations, and that's fine. You just take what applies to you and you leave the rest. And again, like I was saying about kitchens, this is standard stuff in kitchens, like temperature control, quality control, rotation of foods, etc. So try not to be so intimidated by it. This is stuff that you've always done if you've worked service jobs. You're just the one that's in control of it now. So just start by writing stuff down. Even if you're just handwriting it in a notebook, if you have that documentation, that's it. We, like I said, have a worksheet now that is super easy to just print off every time we make a recipe and fill out, and that's something that I do want to offer to you all soon. I just need to make it less personalized so that I can give it to you all. To the testing. So we talked a little bit about it in the beginning. I'm going to post some links in the description of this, but there's a bazillion places you can send products to, so literally the links that I'm sending you just came from Google searching natural product testing. And again, it's going to make more sense for you to choose where you're testing it because there's not just one lab that tests salves, oils, tinctures, witch hazel infusions, etc., everything. And they're testing it for heavy metals, contamination, dosing, or what's the word I'm thinking of, potency, etc. No. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You're going to send tinctures here, raw herb material here, syrups here. If you want to test it for potency, you're going to send it here. So it's just going to make more sense for me to just send a general search with links for you guys to kind of pick and choose. The other thing is like how complex of a panel you want. That's going to change the price a lot. So how much are you wanting to spend? I don't think it's necessary to test every batch once you have like a tried and true recipe. I do think it's very enlightening and cool to test, once you have perfected a recipe, send it off for testing so you know what the potency is, if there's any contaminants in the ingredients that you're committing to using for that recipe, etc. It's not that expensive. It's really fine. When we decided all of our permanent products and made labels for all of them, we committed to sourcing ingredients from the same places for this reason and sent everything off for testing. Yeah, I hope that answers that question. And then there's like some at home testing depending on what you're doing. Like I always test for pH. That's something that I like to document on my recipes. Again, that's kind of more just something for consistency. Like, oh, weird. I wonder why the pH of these berries is different than last time. Any of my homesteaders that can out there knows that we really want the pH to be below, I think, 7. You never want it to be above 7. And then for more like acidic things like syrups, I think the magic number is like right at 4 for preservation. Trying to think of what else. I could talk a little bit about preservation. Preservation is so interesting because it matters a lot if you're making products that have water in them. But then there's also times that I really want to avoid it. For example, a good preservative is not only extending shelf life, but it is killing any intrusive microbes, like when you dip your fingers into a jar, etc. And that's not always good because we like the microbes on our skin, for example. Like, you don't always want heavy antimicrobials. We love antimicrobials. A lot of our first aid salves and sprays are full of antimicrobial herbs, but the heavy antimicrobials in preservatives are sometimes a little too much. And this is why I don't love face creams. A face cream is going to have water whipped into it. That's the difference in like a face cream and like a face butter or balm or salve that doesn't need water and therefore doesn't need a preservative. So you're kind of preserving your microbials on your face. And that's kind of a good thing sometimes. Like, we don't always want to strip ourselves of microbes. The only times, like I said, that we use preservatives is in anything that includes water. Right now, the only products that we have that include water is our Maintainer hair mist, which we use a natural preservative in, and microbes are going to be a lot less important on like the strands of your hair than like the roots and your skin. So using a natural antimicrobial preservative in that, I'm not worried about at all. And then internal products with water like syrups, we don't use alcohol to preserve them. Our tinctures and our antiviral elixir are alcohol based and therefore self-preserved. But our syrups like elderberry, cold and cough, black nettle, that's mostly herbs, water, some other ingredients like honey or blackstrap molasses, etc. Maybe a tiny bit of tinctures, but if you have under 15% of tinctures or alcohol in a recipe, it's not preserved. So we use citric acid, which is the only completely natural preservative on the market for foods. I recently had somebody get a little upset that we use citric acid in our syrups, which was interesting to me. They had brought up that there was some inflammatory effects, but that's like true for overconsumption of citric acid, which, to be honest, a lot of people probably have, because if you're using like a chai tea concentrate or drinking a natural soda or anything like that, there is citric acid in it. But in our things like elderberry syrups, where there's already an amount of citric acid present in the berries, citric acid comes from citrus fruits, limes. There's some in like tart berries. Citric acid is that tartness that you feel when you eat raspberries, blackberries, limes, lemons, etc. And our citric acid comes 100% from lemons and limes and citrus. And back to what I was saying, our elderberry syrup has a level of citric acid from not only the elderberries, but we use tangerines in it. Same with our cold and cough syrup has tangerine in it. And so you're already getting a little bit of citric acid, and the amount of citric acid that you need to adjust that pH to be stable is so little. It's like squeezing a lemon or a lime in a drink. So I just want to be clear that there's not going to be inflammatory effects from the amount of citric acid that is used to preserve a syrup. People, of course, can have allergies to things, and that's a different case. But if you are not allergic to citrus and citric acid, then you will be just fine. Other preservatives for internal stuff, like there are going to be some that are nature-based or natural, but aren't necessarily plant-based and organic, and that's a big thing to think about when ingesting these like naturally preserved things. I also want to make it clear that you want people to use preservatives. You really do. Like, in my opinion, a natural preservative that isn't the best is going to be better than ingesting botulism, mold, potentially harmful bacterias, right? So you got to kind of pick your poison there. So like I said, with skincare products, I really try to avoid using water altogether. Yeah, I think that answers most things on that. There is an awesome school I can't think of off the top of my head, but if you're interested in making natural skincare products, I think it's called Formula Botanica. They offer courses on things like emulsifiers, stabilizers, preservatives, etc., and they're very nature-based. Emulsifiers are very interesting and very challenging. That's been my number one challenge with our Maintainer spray, is getting, that balance of emulsifier perfect, because we are using a natural emulsifier and you just have to get your ratios just right for it to be the perfect consistency. We can over emulsify, which makes things really thick. We can under emulsify, which causes separation. You don't even have to emulsify. The first few years of my business, I just told people, shake your products, which you should be doing anyways, to get that perfect, evenly distributed amount of ingredients for each use, whether it's a spray, a pump, a dropper. So don't be too intimidated by them. You don't have to use them. But if it's something that fascinates you, that you really want to get ahead of, maybe consider taking a course. Anyways, I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. I'd be happy to answer. If you have any lingering questions about GMPs, preservatives, or testing at all, this is definitely something I'm happy to go over more regularly. Thanks.